I'm about to show you a video. This is regarding the Hegseth, the bombing, the second bombing of that boat that killed the 2 survivors that were clinging onto the boat in the middle of the Caribbean after being bombed by us. And it's Judge Napolitano. I guess he used to work on Fox News with Pete Hegseth, and he makes it very clear that it was a violation of the law and that everybody involved should be held accountable. I guess I wanted to say that that's part of the reason, part of my frustration is that, MAGA specifically, but I think in general, Republicans, well, I'm going to talk about MAGA, Trump supporters, talk about, life, like specifically pro-life for babies that are unborn. They talk about family. They talk about those are values that they say that they have. They talk about the Bible. A lot of them proclaim to be Christian, but so much of what we see in their behavior is the opposite of that. And I've been very, very concerned and confused. Especially starting during the campaign of this administration, that so much of what Trump says is lies. It's just outright lies about people that call those lies cause harm. He's also very divisive. He pits us against one another. He is constantly targeting Democrats or anybody, actually, even Republicans or MAGA, who criticize him or don't agree with him, go against him. I don't understand really the power that he has. It's very concerning, actually, over his base. Why, when the news is telling you something different, government statistics is telling you something different, the courts are telling you something different, even somebody in your own party like Marjorie Taylor Greene is telling you something different, and you guys, no matter what, will fall in line. It's like he said during that first campaign that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and you guys would just adore him anyway and vote for him anyway. I don't understand that. I know you guys think that he sacrificed for the country and that he's a good person and that he's tough, and I see none of that. I know he's not sacrificing. Actually, he's robbing us blind. I do believe that. He is using his power to make a lot of money. So that whole, that he declines his paycheck or donates his paycheck or whatever, I don't care. I mean, he's made millions, maybe even billions off the presidency through the meme coin and his private dinners and, hit the resorts that he's putting his name on. Basically, anywhere that he visits, his kids go behind, especially like Don Jr. and who the other one is, I can't remember. But Eric and Don Jr. follow him behind, and they're establishing, basically, he's making arrangements with those governments to put his names on resorts and golf courses and high rises. He's branding. He's basically selling his brand in those countries, in those cities, wherever he visits. The foreign cities, when he goes outside of the country. What I was starting to say was that the cognitive dissonance. We talk about I always felt like Republicans were the party of, all growing up, they were the party. They stood on the Constitution. Although, I mean, of any party, of either of the parties, the Republicans have definitely been more, historically, more likely to try to gain more power, to lessen the strength of the other branches, the executive party or the executive power. They want to, unitary, they call it unitary authority. Basically what they're saying is that President Trump, under Article 2 of the Constitution, can do whatever he wants. And that's not the way the Constitution is written. The whole reason that so many sacrifices, right? The lives of our military members that have fought for our freedom, do all of these words kind of resonate with you? The reason that was important, these centuries later, is because we wanted freedom. The founders structured our government so that no one person would have all of the power, because we didn't want to be in the situation that we were, that before the English settlers came over, that they were dealing with in the other European countries that they came from, the European settlers, where they came from. And then also, we didn't want to deal with, back then, the country who was here didn't want to deal with, the English government trying to tax everything without representation. We wanted to be free. And we developed this government, the 3 branches. We didn't want one branch to have too much power. And Trump is gobbling that, and he uses fear to do it. And I don't understand how you guys can't see it. The MAGA people, I don't understand how you can't see it. It's really actually startling and scary. And so when I get really upset, and because I've been called obsessive, and it's because I want for our posterity to have the same freedoms we have had. And I feel like it's just I used to, feel like maybe it was going to be chipped away and maybe we would have something left over at the end of this administration. I don't think so anymore. I think it could be, if it's not already gone, I feel like it could be gone very soon. He's not just chipping away at it. He's taking that big chainsaw that Elon used when he was, anyway, I won't even go there. That's what it feels like Trump is doing, is he's using a big chainsaw to just chop away at our rights in our country and our freedoms. And why would he do that? I know that some of you really believe that he loves the country. I don't. I believe that it's all about the dollar. It's all about the dollar. What he can do for he and his friends. If he can deregulate so that they can, make more money because they don't have to go through all of the hoops to manufacture. If he can put his name on high rises and golf courses in other countries, if he can, whatever, the meme coin, but also the wheeling and dealing he's doing. Basically, he slaps lawsuits on news organizations, and then forces, basically, because he has the power to keep them from being able to to merge with other companies. They basically, he is exploiting the power of his job to gain wealth for himself. I don't know how else to put it, and I don't know why you guys can't. Those of you who can't see it, I don't know why you can't see it. But going back to what I was originally talking about, the Republicans and the MAGA and the Bible and like valuing family and life, but over and over and over and over and over again, I hear people that identify as MAGA actually not, they're not, when you're, they say they value the Bible and family and life, but when you're not talking about that, like when they're not proclaiming that, they don't present as having those values. Like, it doesn't seem to be that many people see it as an issue that there would be men clinging onto a boat that we bombed out in the middle of the Caribbean, 2 men, and that the order was given to strike again, to kill them, to leave no survivors. They weren't provided due process. They weren't a risk to us in that moment. They didn't pose an imminent risk in that moment. But anybody who identifies as MAGA that I've seen recently talk about this, they basically are in full support of what happened. That, there's no problem. They're drug runners, basically. So when do we murder drug runners? We don't do that in our own country to drug dealers. Even if you can link, like if somebody, dies of a ketamine overdose or heroin overdose, and we can identify who provided those drugs, we don't put them to death. That's not what happens. I feel like with MAGA, so often what I'm hearing is that you lose, how am I going to put this? I'm trying to figure out the words. You lose your humanity. You get into that. Oftentimes people on MAGA, they get into such a state of mind of just this primitive, it's a cognitive dissonance. You don't show us your values when you do that. Those values you proclaim to have. And you can say, these drug runners are responsible for all of these. You can tell me, you can give me the talking points that I've heard Carolyn Levitt, or whatever her name is, say, and other people under the administration talk about the thousands of people that each of these, boat bombings saves. Well, first of all, there's no evidence of that. But second of all, drugs from Venezuela, it's not fentanyl, which is the real killer, right? I know that people die of overdoses with other drugs, but fentanyl is a big one, and it doesn't come from Venezuela. What we're getting from Venezuela is, if there are even drugs on those boats, we're getting cocaine, which is not a good thing either. But we had other ways of addressing that before. So this is the thing, okay? In the past, the Navy and the Coast Guard, they actually had a whole protocol where they would board onto a boat or a ship, and they would search it and seize anything on it that was harmful or illegal. We've done that for decades at least, maybe even longer. I have personal knowledge of this because I knew somebody personally who was on one of those teams. That's the way so it's not like there's a boat going through the Caribbean and there's no other way for us to seize what is on that boat. For me, this feels like bloodthirst. Have you guys heard Pete Hegseth talk about the warrior ethos, and that they're killers, and that they're not going to basically be held back by, petty laws of war or whatever, the rules of engagement, that he feels like basically that it holds back the kind of the killer instinct of the warriors.
We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters.
Dude, that he does not need to be the secretary. Nobody is constraining that man. And he has this whole idea of what the military needs to represent that is so different than what most of the country wants for our military to represent. It is different than what it is that will maintain healthy relationships between the U.S. and other countries. It's all about fear and killing and how to do like the most harm. I totally believe that Pete Hegseth gave the order to kill make sure everybody is dead at that boat strike. From what I understand, the admiral that was part of that chain of command in charge of that mission actually has a stellar record and understands very well the rules of engagement. I have a feeling when this administration is over, we are going to find out so much shit. And it's not going to be like Sleepy Joe or Hunter's laptop. Or when people throw that in my face, or, you know, anybody who, I don't even think of it as like MAGA and woke anymore. I think of it as like a decent human decency, people that believe in human decency versus MAGA. It's us versus them. And right now, they wield so much power because the man in the White House, you know, people are afraid of. And I don't know if you guys know much about leadership, but leading by fear never turns out good. There's, you know, some people, you could argue that maybe a little bit of fear is good, but when people don't feel like they can stand up and speak out when they see atrocities, or when they feel like people are being treated wrong, or they don't agree with a leader's decision, if fear prevents you from doing that, like fear of that leader and what he might do and how whatever he might do will make you a target or cause harm to your family, or because that's what happens is like somebody will speak out. We'll use Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's the most recent, right? There might be others, but she's the biggest one recently because she was totally MAGA. And I know that it breaks her heart. I'm sure I'm not a big fan of hers, but I know that it totally breaks her heart that things happen the way they did because she was a full-on MAGA person. When I think about her, actually, I think about her sitting in the House, in the chamber, and she's like full on dressed in MAGA gear, and talking back to Biden when he's giving like some kind of an address to the House. I don't know if it was the state of, I don't know if it was that annual speech that the president gives, but the president was basically talking to the House, and she was like mouthing off to him, and she had on this full like red, white, and blue, and I think and she was talking about Lincoln Riley, and she was full on. So I know that it breaks her heart. I know that she didn't see this coming, but what happened was she, once it became clear the ACA subsidies were about to expire, and she stood up for her constituents, and she said, and basically, it was the Epstein files, and she stood up for her constituents and basically said, I'm not going to vote to agree to end the shutdown until you guys agree to continue the subsidies, to extend the subsidies. And so Trump was like, you're not on my side anymore, and he made her a target. He basically said, I'm going to support you, and she got death threats, and her family got death threats, and she said that she would be, basically, she said, I don't know if you're listening to this, if you heard this, but she basically said it was like being that she's not going to stay in the House because she refuses to be a battered wife. And that's what it's like when you go, if you're listening to this and you identify as MAGA, how fucked up is that? To stay in government, to represent your constituents, to do what's right, basically, you have to agree to be the equivalent of a battered wife, to be targeted and verbally abused and lied about. That is what it's like to stand up to Trump or to even go against him. And it's not supposed to be that way. And if you support him, that is what you're supporting. It's not toughness. It's not, it's not alpha. It's fucking barbaric and mean, and it's killing the country. It's killing the humanity in the country. It's killing us financially. I don't care what he says. The fact that he will not open his mind to the fact that his decisions they're damaging our country. It's causing harm with our relationship with other countries. I mean, he thinks like, people respect us now. No. When they say nice things to him, it's to kiss his ass so they can get something from him. They don't respect us. He confuses that. And most narcissists do, don't they? They don't understand the difference between genuine respect and I'm going to say something nice to you so I can get because that's the only way to get what I want from you. Is to say something nice to you, to kiss your ass, to basically praise you and tell you how wonderful you are. Then you'll cooperate with me, because otherwise you're not really thinking about what's best for us. You want us to kiss your ass and praise you and tell you how wonderful you are. That's not a leader. Anyway, here is Judge Napolitano and what he said about Pete Hegseth. That dude needs to be reined in. He is off the hook for real. And there is nothing alpha about it. You can just, be talking in your Discord about how tough that is, and we need strong leaders and we need the rest of the world to respect us. And that is not, they don't respect us. They're laughing at us, and then they kiss Trump's ass when they need something from him, because that is the only way you get something from him. That's not a leader.
Judge Andrew Napolitano is joining us with this senior judicial analyst. Again, the White House is very clear that they were acting within the scope of the law. The orders were given to take out these boats, and this continues on to their effort to stop drug trafficking here in the States. It does get a little murky of what happened in terms of the orders, who carried what, who said what. Talk to us about that.
Well, I wish the White House would reveal to us the laws on which the president is relying. He says he has an opinion from the Justice Department, but neither the Justice Department or the White House will offer it for public scrutiny. And it gives me no pleasure to say what I'm about to say, because I worked with Pete Hegseth for 7 or 8 years at Fox News. This is an act of a war crime. Ordering survivors who the law requires be rescued instead to be murdered. There's absolutely no legal basis for it. Everybody along the line who did it, from the Secretary of Defense to the Admiral to the people who actually pulled the trigger, should be prosecuted for a war crime for killing these 2 people.
And who would bring that prosecution forward?
Military would bring that, because they're all active duty military. Not the Secretary of Defense, but everybody else would be subject to a court-martial. I don't know where this is going to go. Republicans in the Congress seem to be as exacerbated by it as the Democrats do. I think it's getting beyond politics now. The killing is out of hand. And this last one, in which Pete Hegseth first denied that he gave the order, and then the White House said he did give the order, and then the White House said it was in self-defense. Self-defense. You got 2 people in the ocean clinging to a burning boat to stay alive, and they're going to be killed for self-defense? That doesn't make any sense.
For the viewers that may not know about that part, I have it for them. This is the White House press secretary talking about this being conducted in self-defense. Watch.
The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests. The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
Well, the law of armed conflict says survivors have to be rescued. They can't be killed. That's very clear. It's in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it's in federal law. So we'll see where this goes. I think that both houses of Congress are going to investigate it.
She goes on to say this. I just wanted to read this quote. The president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists are again trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he, meaning the president, has the authority to kill them. That is what this administration is doing, end quote. Killing 11 in that moment. So you're saying that's not a good defense. This is a war crime. That from you.
Correct. Correct. Even Congressman...
They're heavy words.
Very heavy words, which is why I prefaced it by saying it gives me no pleasure to do it. I'm accusing them of crimes that could incarcerate them or even execute them if this stuff was enforced to the hilt. I wish it hadn't happened, and I wish I didn't have to say it, but I have to be intellectually honest about what I'm observing here.
You don't see any other side that, because you're very well versed in the law. We know that. You don't see any other side of argument for the administration other than a war crime is committed. There is no other avenue to look at this.
Look, narco-terrorist is not a legal term. It's a political term, and using that political term does not justify.
But if they're labeled terrorists by the administration, doesn't that indeed indicate that they are?
No. Only if they're engaged in violence can the military kill them. The military can't
legally. But it seems violent if they're coming here with drugs that could kill Americans. Is that not so?
Well, they're 1,500 miles from the United States in a speedboat with a 50-mile distance. It's inconceivable it could reach the United States.
Okay. I'll leave that one there. Judge Andrew Napolitano, again, heavy words from you. I do appreciate the honesty about it, which we would continue to follow.
I wanted to say that I've thought more about it, and I know earlier I said that I think that Trump is in it for the money, and I think partly that's true, but mainly it's for the power, maybe even for his own idea of what he wants his legacy to be, to actually, I don't know. You know, they say that narcissists are actually empty inside. They're constantly looking for something to fill that void, to feel important, and no matter what, that thirst is never satisfied. That urge, that what am I looking for? That it's never satisfied. And so I think that part of what's happening, if I had to guess, is that maybe he doesn't feel completely fulfilled, and I think that's the reason all the praise and acknowledgement is so important to him. Is in his mind, maybe he thinks that will fill that void, or that recognition, and you know, showing him that he is, for people to understand that he is an important figure in our country and our history. But what happens though is that if he doesn't get that validation, he gets, you know, he lashes out and kind of flails about. Something that has puzzled me in the last year or so, and just doesn't make sense to me, is that, you know, Trump sues, let's go with news organizations, because he feels like they slandered or defamed him, okay? They said something, which is really interesting, because one of the news organizations that, I can't remember how much he settled for, like 10 million, I think. What it was is that during the campaign, Kamala did an interview, and the way, I think it was 60 Minutes, edited it, made her, in his opinion, in Trump's opinion, it made Kamala look smarter and more organized. And so he sued them because he basically said, you know, it wasn't fair. He still won the election. So there really was no, in my understanding of defamation, there really was no harm that came of it. But he sued them. And basically they settled with him for like $10 million because they needed him to sign off on their, you know, business deal. They were merging with some company, and they needed the administration to sign off on that merger. That's what I mean about using his power to get rich, to get wealthy, to add to his wealth. But he will, you know, sue. I guess the BBC also edited his January 6th, and he's threatening to sue, or already has sued. But he talks a lot about slander and the news. Well, let's talk about the news. The news is fake news because they say things that are not correct, and they aren't, you know, he's so fixated on that to the point where he causes distrust with his base, and actually his base and every other organization, you know, whether, like I said earlier, it's the news, the courts, it's government. He causes distrust. If they don't support what his goals are, or if they are critical of him, he turns his base against those. Do you guys see this? Maggot, do you see that he does this? That basically the only source of information that you guys trust is him and the people that he agrees with, that he says you can trust these people. That's it. Everything else he has said, fake news, they're liars, you know. So I'm going by, I always do this. I go down rabbit holes. So he gets upset and says that he's being slandered and defamed and people are lying. And it's sometimes over minor things. And yet he can say the Haitian migrants ate cats and dogs and has never corrected it, didn't care about the harm. And what I get from MAGA is you know, not even worth it for most of you to look into it, to acknowledge that he lied, to acknowledge the harm that was done with that. There were death threats. There were bomb scares. The Proud Boys marched into their community. There was harm that resulted from Trump saying that. Multiple times, by the way, without any evidence. But then he and his administration have been, this is actually, I'm just going to try to summarize, just kind of give you a synopsis. They sent over 200 men to El Salvador, to a gulag, a terrorist prison known for its human rights violation in El Salvador. And they lied. They said that all of those men were criminals and they were leaders of gangs and they were so dangerous. And what we found out is that most of those men were not criminals. And most of those, or not many of them, had no gang history and had no criminal history. And so that makes me think, well, why would Trump lie about that? Just as a show of strength? If you're going to take people away from their families and ship them to a gulag in another country, and you're going to lie about it so that people are afraid, that's fucked up. If you're listening to this, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to look up Kilmar or Albrego Garcia. He is one of those men that was sent to El Salvador. And the administration has repeatedly lied about, you know, lied. The administration has refused to acknowledge when they've, they sent him to El Salvador, and he actually had a order from a judge from several years previous to that that basically blocked him from being able to be sent back to El Salvador, but he was. And then the administration kept lying to the judge and saying they couldn't bring him back because there were, a judge was court ordering that he be brought back since there was already orders blocking him from being sent there. Eventually, they cooked up some criminal charges to justify bringing him back, and he has pretty much been detained. The way of this administration, this man, as a father and husband, the way they have been treating him and toying with him and refusing to accept any responsibility. I'm sorry, when we talk about drug runners in the Caribbean, I don't believe anything this administration says. I've seen that they do not even think twice about lying about anyone, but especially if they have tan skin and especially if they're not citizens. They don't even think. And in MAGA, when I say something to MAGA about this, what I get back in response is, you care more about the citizens, or you care more about the immigrants than you do, U.S. citizens, this country. And that's not true. What I do care about is human rights. And it is not within me to be able to just sit and watch human beings being railroaded. If MAGA says that being a Christian and their family and patriotism, well, let's just say being a Christian and their family and life is important to them, and then I see them, support a man and not even care that multiple men were sent without due process to El Salvador that had no criminal histories and, were accused of being the hardest of criminals and gang leaders, and there's no evidence of many of them having that history, and you don't care? I'm sorry, I can't believe that you care about life and freedom and family. I can't. Either that, or I have to believe that you just don't care about them and their life and their family and their freedom. Because why? Why is that? Why would it not matter to you that innocent men were sent to a gulag in El Salvador, and then we were lied about their criminal history? We were lied to about that, their criminal history, and they were accused of being, gang leaders. We were lied to about that for many of them. And then when I stand up and I say something about it over and over and over again, what I get from people that identify as MAGA is, you care more about the immigrants than you do about the country. I just don't, whatever. What the fuck is wrong? Do you care about human rights? Because they can send El Salvador men, or most of them were Venezuela, but they can, migrant men, some of them, by the way, were here illegally. They can send them to El Salvador, to a gulag. By the way, they didn't just send them to El Salvador, they sent them to a prison without due process. They weren't sentenced to prison. They were sent by the administration. And actually, in that process, they were told to send the planes back by a judge. And they violated that court order. And that's when I started saying he doesn't care about the Constitution. And he's trying to hoard all the power for himself. And there have been plenty of examples since then. Right now, that case is not dead. So look up Kilmar Albrego Garcia. He's sitting in an ICE detention center right now. The administration is fucking playing games. The court has basically found reason to believe that the administration is likely behaving in vindictive ways. They're engaged in all of this because they're being vindictive. That's the president that you support, by the way. And he's just sitting there. He agreed they basically said you can go to Costa Rica, but you have to plead guilty to these charges. And he said no, because it's bullshit. And a judge pretty much found that there was no reason to hold him and released him without bail, a criminal judge, because there wasn't enough evidence to support the charges that they brought him back from El Salvador to face. You see what I'm saying? Pay attention. And you may not care because he's a migrant. He's also a father. He came over here when he was, and he's not an angel. I'm going to tell you that right now. So you can go ahead and do your research and come back and tell me all about, how he beat his wife, and he was pulled over, by, police coming back with basically a whole van full of migrants. He was bringing for, work and that, but he came here when he was 16 fled from El Salvador because gangs were threatening to kill him. And we know that's true because that's the reason his deportation back to El Salvador was blocked several years ago. Is because there was enough evidence that a judge said, I believe you when you say you fear that your life is at risk. But he was 16 and he migrated here by himself. Do you care about humans? Do you care about families? Do you care about fathers? And I'm not saying he should stay here. And I'm not saying he's an angel. But I'm saying there are certain things in place. like due process and acting humanely and not being vindictive. We don't have the right, no branch of government, no person elected or appointed has the right to send us to prison without due process. And the Constitution covers that right with migrants as well, especially if you're sending them to a prison. But it seems like MAGA doesn't care. They don't care. And if we're going to give him that power to do that with migrants, what's next? Kids with autism or adults with autism? What about women that aren't fertile anymore? There's a reason that we have the 3 branches of government.